A crisp winter morning in London, the air hangs heavy with frost. On a park bench lies John, a British Army veteran. He served his country with honour. Now he battles homelessness. Meanwhile, a luxury coach arrives at a hotel. Illegal immigrants receive warm beds and hot meals. This is modern Britain, a nation grappling with a moral dilemma. The stark contrast between the treatment of illegal immigrants and homeless veterans is a festering wound on the soul of Britain. It speaks of a nation struggling to reconcile its compassion with its conscience, its history with its present. The images are impossible to ignore. Rows of neatly made beds in plush hotel rooms contrasted with makeshift cardboard shelters lining the streets, the smell of freshly cooked meals in hotel restaurants, juxtaposed with the gnawing hunger pangs of veterans queuing at soup kitchens. These are not isolated incidents, but symptoms of a deeper malaise, a systemic failure that has left many Brits questioning their own government's priorities. The question on everyone's lips is simple. Why are our veterans, those who sacrificed so much for our freedom, being abandoned while those who entered illegally are being rewarded? The answer, as this documentary will reveal, lies in a tangled web of political expediency, misplaced compassion, and a profound lack of accountability. A system where virtue signalling trumps common sense, and where the needs of the many are sacrificed at the altar of the few. Every day, hundreds of illegal immigrants risk their lives crossing the English Channel in flimsy dinghies, lured by the promise of a better life. This influx has reached crisis proportions, overwhelming our borders and stretching our resources thin. Footage captured at Dover paints a chaotic picture: overcrowded boats intercepted by the Coast Guard, men, women and children, many without life jackets, scrambling ashore. Their faces, etched with a mixture of relief and trepidation, tell a story of desperation and audacious hope. Yet within hours of setting foot on British soil, these individuals, many of whom have no legal right to be here, are whisked away to comfortable hotels across the country. This is not a temporary stopover, but often a prolonged stay funded entirely by the British taxpayer. The government argues that this is a humanitarian necessity, that these people are fleeing war and persecution, but is it truly compassionate to encourage dangerous journeys across treacherous waters? And is it fair to prioritize the needs of those who break the law over those who have played by the rules? The cost of housing illegal immigrants in hotels is staggering, running into millions of pounds a day. This at a time when the nation is facing a cost of living crisis, when essential services are being cut and when many Britons are struggling to put food on the table. Meanwhile, the number of homeless veterans continues to rise. These are men and women who have served our country with distinction, who have put their lives on the line for our freedom. Yet they are left to fend for themselves on the streets, their sacrifices seemingly forgotten. How can a government that claims to be compassionate justify such a glaring disparity in treatment? How can it prioritize the needs of those who have broken the law over those who have dedicated their lives to upholding it? The answer, it seems, lies in a toxic mix of political correctness and a fear of being labelled racist or xenophobic. A fear that has paralyzed meaningful debate and allowed this injustice to fester. The journey often begins in the dead of night. A clandestine meeting at a remote truck stop on the outskirts of Calais. The air crackles with tension. Hope and fear hang heavy in the air. These are the faces of those willing to risk it all for a new life in Britain. They come from across the globe, drawn by the promise of a land paved with gold. Or so they've been told by the ruthless people smugglers who profit from their desperation. Men, women and children herded like cattle, carrying little more than the clothes on their backs and dreams of a brighter future. They are fleeing war, they say, fleeing persecution, fleeing poverty, and while some may be telling the truth, many are economic migrants seeking a better life, not escaping imminent danger. Their stories, often embellished, are rarely questioned. To question is to be branded heartless, lacking in compassion, and so they wait. their fate in the hands of criminal gangs, their futures uncertain, their lives hanging in the balance. They are pawns in a dangerous game, a game played out on the shores of Britain, a game where the only winners are the smugglers who exploit their vulnerability. The flimsy inflatable boats bob precariously on the choppy waters of the English Channel. Overloaded and underprepared, they are death traps, held together by hope and desperation. The passengers, crammed in like sardines, huddled together for warmth against the biting wind. The journey is fraught with danger. The Channel is one of the busiest shipping lanes in the world. The currents are strong, the waters unforgiving. Yet, fueled by the belief that the streets of Britain are paved with gold, they press on, oblivious to the risks, or perhaps simply resigned to their fate. The money for this perilous voyage has often been wired from abroad, sometimes from the very countries these people are fleeing. Families sacrifice everything, remortgaging homes, taking out loans they can ill afford, all for the slim chance of a better life for their loved ones. Little do they know that the better life promised by the smugglers is a lie. The reality that awaits them on the other side of the Channel is far from the idyllic existence they have been sold. But by then it will be too late. They will be trapped, pawns in a cynical game played out by those who care little for their well-being. As dawn breaks over the white cliffs of Dover, the first boats arrive, met not by border guards but by volunteers offering blankets and warm drinks. This is British compassion, which many feel is misplaced and exploited. After a cursory medical check, they are whisked away to comfortable hotels, often 3- or 4-star establishments booked at taxpayers' expense. They are given food, clothing and spending money. They have access to healthcare and legal advice, integrated into the system as citizens in waiting. While thousands of British citizens sleep rough, their pleas ignored. The government argues it has a duty of care to these people, legally obliged to provide accommodation while asylum claims are processed. But with the asylum system in chaos and a backlog of cases, this temporary solution has become a permanent fixture, a costly and unsustainable burden on the British taxpayer. Luxury on tap, a stark contrast to the struggles back home. Inside the hotels, the scene is one of surreal normality. Families gather in the lobbies, children play in the corridors. The aroma of cooked meals wafts from the dining rooms. Life for these new arrivals is good, better in many cases than the life they left behind. Gone is the fear of persecution, the hunger, the poverty, replaced by the comfort of a warm bed, 3 meals a day, and the knowledge that their every need is being met. They have access to televisions, to the internet, to all the trappings of modern life that many in their homeland could only dream of. The contrast with the lives of many struggling Britons could not be starker. Families forced to choose between heating and eating, pensioners riding the buses to stay warm, veterans sleeping rough on the streets they once risked their lives to defend. Is this fair? Is this just? These are the questions that many in Britain are asking, questions that the government seems unwilling or unable to answer, questions that cut to the heart of what it means to be British in the 21st century. The British taxpayer footing the bill for a broken system. The cost of housing illegal immigrants in hotels is a closely guarded secret. The government refuses to divulge the true figures. Independent estimates put the cost at millions of pounds a day. This money could be spent on schools and hospitals, on supporting veterans and pensioners, on tackling the cost of living crisis. Instead, it funds a broken asylum system. The government argues it has a moral duty to help. But charity begins at home. Millions of Britons are in desperate need of help. This is the reality of Britain's immigration crisis, a crisis of compassion, conscience and leadership, a crisis tearing the nation apart. the plight of Britain's forgotten heroes. The images are etched into our collective memory. Brave young men and women proudly wearing the Queen's uniform, risking their lives in distant lands. They fought for our freedom, for our safety, for our way of life. They returned home, decorated for their bravery, hailed as heroes. But the applause fades, the medals gather dust, and for a growing number of veterans, the homecoming is a bitter disappointment. They find themselves forgotten, abandoned by the very system they swore to protect. These are not isolated cases. These are not statistics. These are human beings, men and women who served their country with honor only to be cast aside like yesterday's news. They deserve better. We owe them better. How can we, in good conscience, offer lavish hospitality to those who have broken the law, while those who bled for our flag are left to sleep rough on our streets? It is a national disgrace, a betrayal of the highest order. From battlefield to breadline, the broken promises to veterans, they were promised the world. A grateful nation would take care of them, they were told. They would be supported, retrained, reintegrated into civilian life. But for many, the reality is a far cry from the promises made. The transition from military to civilian life is never easy. Many veterans struggle to cope with the psychological scars of war, PTSD, depression, anxiety. These are the invisible wounds that run deep. They need help, not handouts. They need access to mental health services, to housing, to employment opportunities. They need to know that their sacrifice has not been in vain, that their country has not forgotten them, but instead they are met with indifference, with bureaucracy, with a system that seems designed to make their lives as difficult as possible. They are shuffled from pillar to post, their pleas for help falling on deaf ears. The government claims to be committed to supporting veterans. They point to increased funding for veterans' services, to new initiatives designed to help them find jobs and housing. But the reality on the ground tells a different story. The funding is never enough. The initiatives are often poorly implemented, and meanwhile the number of homeless veterans continues to rise. It is a national scandal, a damning indictment of a system that has lost its way. How can it be that in one of the richest countries in the world, those who have sacrificed so much are left to fend for themselves? How can it be that we are spending millions of pounds each day housing illegal immigrants in hotels while our own veterans are sleeping rough on the streets? It is a question that demands an answer. It is a question that shames us all. It is a question that the government cannot continue to ignore. Stories from the streets. Meet John. He served in Afghanistan. He saw things that no one should ever have to see. He came home a changed man, haunted by his experiences. He turned to alcohol to numb the pain. He lost his job, his family, his home. Now he sleeps rough on the streets, another casualty of a war that never seems to end. Meet Sarah. She was a medic in Iraq. She saved countless lives, but she couldn't save herself from the trauma she witnessed. She suffers from PTSD and depression. She's unable to hold down a job. She relies on food banks to survive. She is one of the lucky ones. She has a roof over her head for now. These are just two stories among thousands, stories of courage, of sacrifice, of betrayal, stories that shame us all, stories that should make us angry, that should spur us to action. These are not just statistics. These are human beings. They are our fathers, our mothers, our sons, our daughters. They are the best of us, and we are failing them. Where is the outrage? A nation numbed by apathy. Where is the outrage? Where are the protests? Where is the public outcry at this injustice? Have we as a nation become so inured to the plight of our veterans that we no longer even bat an eyelid? We are bombarded with images of suffering from around the world. We are told to care about refugees fleeing war and persecution, and rightly so. But what about the refugees on our own doorstep? What about the veterans who are fleeing the demons of war, the demons that we as a society have unleashed? We cannot, in good conscience, continue to ignore their plight. We cannot allow ourselves to become numb to their suffering. We must find our voices again. We must demand better for those who have given so much. The time for apathy is over. The time for action is now. Demanding justice for those who serve. We cannot stand idly by while those who fought for our freedom are left to sleep rough on our streets. We must demand better for our veterans. Write to your MP, donate to veterans' charities, volunteer your time. Every little bit helps. Keep raising awareness. Our veterans deserve more than just our gratitude. They deserve our support, our respect, and our unwavering commitment. Let us honor their sacrifice by demanding justice for those who served. The hotel industry's lucrative secret. Behind the gleaming facades of Britain's hotels, a dirty secret thrives. While veterans sleep rough on the streets, hotel owners are lining their pockets, exploiting a crisis for their own financial gain. The government's insatiable demand for accommodation for illegal immigrants has created a gold rush for hoteliers. Lucrative contracts, often worth millions, are awarded with little transparency. Entire hotels are now closed to the public, their rooms filled not with holidaymakers, but with those who have entered the country illegally. The government pays handsomely, and there are no fussy guests to please. This is the dirty secret of the hotel industry. A secret that speaks volumes about the state of modern Britain. Walk down any high street in Britain today and you'll likely pass a hotel with its doors closed to the public. Closed for refurbishment, a sign might proclaim, or perhaps a more vague message about limited availability. But the truth is far more sinister. These hotels are not undergoing renovations. They are empty, deliberately kept that way, while their owners cash in on the government's largesse. The government needs beds, and these hoteliers are only too happy to provide them at a price. While veterans shiver in doorways, these hoteliers sleep soundly in their own comfortable beds, their bank balances swollen with taxpayer money. It's a shameful indictment of a society that has lost its moral compass. This is not about business, it's about basic human decency, and right now the hotel industry is failing the test. The government's desperate scramble to house illegal immigrants has created a moral quagmire. Hoteliers, sensing an opportunity, have been quick to capitalize on the government's desperation. These are not contracts negotiated in good faith. They are Faustian bargains, agreements made with a blind eye, turned to the human cost. Hoteliers, their consciences conveniently silenced by the clinking of coins, are complicit in a system that prioritizes profit over people. It's easy to hide behind spreadsheets and balance sheets to justify greed in the name of business acumen, but behind the cold, hard numbers lies a human cost, a cost that is too often ignored. Every empty hotel room represents a lost opportunity, a chance to provide shelter to someone in desperate need. But these individuals are invisible to the hoteliers, their plight irrelevant in the face of profit margins and shareholder dividends. This is the human cost of the hotel industry's Faustian bargain, a cost that is measured not in pounds and pence, but in shattered lives and broken dreams. It's a cost that we, as a society, can no longer afford to ignore. The current state of affairs is not just a national embarrassment. It's an affront to the very values that Britain holds dear. Fairness, compassion, looking after our own, these are the principles that have defined our nation for generations. Yet they are being eroded before our very eyes, sacrificed on the altar of expediency and greed. We are told that we live in a society that values fairness and equality. But what is fair about a system that prioritizes the needs of those who have broken the law over those who have spent their lives upholding it? This is a Britain where greed has triumphed over compassion, where self-interest has replaced the common good. When confronted with the stark reality of their choices, the hotel industry is quick to deflect blame. They argue that they are merely responding to market forces, that they are providing a service that the government demands. They wash their hands of any responsibility, claiming to be mere pawns in a larger game. The government, for its part, is equally adept at passing the buck. They blame the broken asylum system, the lack of affordable housing, the complexities of the welfare state. Meanwhile, caught in the crossfire are those who are truly suffering. The blame game achieves nothing. The time has come for those in positions of power to stop passing the buck and start taking responsibility. The veil of secrecy surrounding the government's deals with the hotel industry must be lifted. The public has a right to know how their money is being spent, who is profiting, and at what cost. Transparency is essential to ensure accountability and prevent the exploitation of a system designed to help those in need. We demand to know the terms of these contracts. We demand to know how much profit these hotels are making. The hotel industry cannot be allowed to operate with impunity, their actions shielded from public scrutiny. We, the British people, have a right to know how our money is being spent. It's time for the hotel industry to be held accountable. The official figures are shocking enough, thousands of people sleeping rough on the streets of Britain every night. But the true scale of the problem is likely far worse. Hidden homelessness, where people are forced to sleep in cars, on sofas, in temporary accommodation, is a silent epidemic. The faces of homelessness are diverse. Young people failed by the care system, families evicted from their homes due to the cost of living crisis, veterans struggling to cope with the invisible wounds of war. We see them on our streets, huddled in doorways, their belongings in plastic bags. This is the reality of modern Britain, a reality that exists in the shadows of our comfortable lives. Among the homeless, a particular group stands out. Their presence a stark reminder of the broken promises made to those who served their country. Veterans, once hailed as heroes, now find themselves discarded, their sacrifices forgotten, their needs ignored. They fought for our freedom, risked their lives in distant lands, witnessed horrors that most of us can only imagine. They returned home, physically and mentally scarred, only to be met with indifference. The physical wounds of war may heal, but the invisible wounds, the trauma, the PTSD, the nightmares, these linger. This is the ultimate betrayal. Shelter, a roof overhead, a place to feel safe and secure. It seems like such a basic human need, yet for thousands of people in Britain it is an unattainable luxury. The lack of affordable housing, coupled with a welfare system that seems designed to trap people in poverty, has created a perfect storm of despair. Families are forced to live in cramped, substandard accommodation, their children growing up with no space to play. And then there are those who have no choice but to sleep rough, exposed to the elements, vulnerable to attack. The right to adequate housing is enshrined in international law. Yet, in modern Britain, it is a right that is routinely denied to the most vulnerable members of our society. The ripple effect, from despair to destitution. Homelessness is not just about the lack of a physical address. It's about the disintegration of lives, the erosion of hope, the descent into a spiral of despair from which escape seems impossible. Without a stable home, it is almost impossible to hold down a job, to access healthcare, to maintain relationships. The stress and trauma of living on the streets take a heavy toll on mental and physical health. Children growing up in homeless families are more likely to experience developmental delays, to suffer from mental health problems. The cycle perpetuates generation after generation. The cost of inaction is high, not just in terms of human suffering, but also in terms of the financial burden placed on our already stretched public services. confronting the human cost of inaction. We cannot continue to avert our gaze. The homeless are not statistics. They are not a problem to be solved. They are human beings, each with their own story to tell. Every time we walk past a homeless person without making eye contact, every time we cross the street to avoid a beggar, we are complicit in their suffering. Our indifference condemns them to a life on the margins, a life devoid of hope and dignity. We are one of the richest countries in the world, yet we tolerate a level of poverty and homelessness that is simply unacceptable. This is not who we are. We must find the political will to tackle this issue head-on. We must create a society where everyone has a safe and affordable place to call home. Amidst the despair, there are glimmers of hope. Across the country, charities and volunteers are working tirelessly to provide food, shelter, and support to those in need. Their compassion and dedication offer a beacon of light in the darkness. But charity alone cannot solve this problem. We need systemic change. We need a government that prioritizes the needs of its most vulnerable citizens. We need a society that recognizes the right to adequate housing as a fundamental human right. The challenges are immense, but we cannot afford to give up hope. The time for apathy is over. Let us build a better future together. The camera pans across a stark, contrasting montage. On one side, the cold, harsh reality of Britain's streets where veterans huddle beneath threadbare blankets. On the other, the warmth and opulence of hotel lobbies where those who entered illegally enjoy comfort. This jarring juxtaposition encapsulates the moral crisis gripping Britain today. A crisis where compassion has been hijacked by political expediency. A crisis that has left the nation deeply divided. How did we arrive at this point where those who swore an oath to protect our nation are left abandoned? How can we tolerate a system that welcomes those who break the law, while those who upheld it are left to fend for themselves? These are not rhetorical questions, but a searing indictment of a nation grappling with its conscience. A nation forced to confront the uncomfortable truth that its actions no longer align with its values. The voices of dissent are growing louder, a chorus of anger and frustration echoing across the nation. From veterans groups to concerned citizens, the message is clear. Enough is enough. The current system is broken, morally bankrupt, and unsustainable. This is not about closing our hearts to those genuinely fleeing persecution. It's about reclaiming the narrative, about demanding a system that prioritizes its own citizens, that honors its commitments, that acts with compassion and common sense in equal measure. The silent majority, those who have watched on in dismay as their nation sleepwalks towards a moral abyss, are finding their voice. They demand accountability from their elected officials, transparency from a government shrouded in secrecy, and a return to the values that once defined this nation. This is not the time for empty promises or political posturing. Action is needed, and it is needed now. The veterans on our streets, the families struggling to keep a roof over their heads, deserve nothing less. The camera slowly pans across a series of poignant images. A young veteran, his face etched with the invisible wounds of war, receiving counseling at a support center. A family moving into a newly built, affordable home, their faces radiating relief and hope. A group of volunteers serving a hot meal to those in need, their actions a testament to the enduring power of human kindness. This is the vision of a just Britain, a Britain that cares for its own, that honors its commitments, that stands as a beacon of hope, not just for those seeking refuge on its shores, but for its own citizens struggling to navigate the complexities of a system that seems to have forgotten them. This is not a utopian dream, but a tangible goal, achievable through a combination of political will, social responsibility, and a fundamental shift in priorities. A Britain where compassion is not a zero-sum game, where the needs of the vulnerable are not pitted against each other, but addressed with empathy and understanding. This is the challenge facing Britain today, to reclaim its humanity, to heal the divisions that threaten to tear it apart, to build a future where everyone has the opportunity to thrive, regardless of their circumstances. The time for change is now. The question is, will we rise to the challenge?